story. I'm sure you're all experts by now on our space, which is having a nice revival. We're a company called Laramide. I'm the CEO, Marc Henderson. We're based here in Toronto. We're listed here in Toronto. We're also listed on the ASX and the OTCQX. We've been around for a long time. We're a developer, late stage developer, and we've got a suite of projects that are going to be available to fill this massive supply gap we've been hearing about for the last couple of days, which is real. I mean, we've been around since the last cycle, as you can see. I'm not going to go too much time on the macro, but you can see from the previous cycles that we had, we're on this kind of third leg of this crazy roller coaster. The last two are really driven by nation state builds out of nuclear power, first America and then China. This one's kind of a little bit of everything, which gives me a lot of hope that it's going to be prolonged. I mean, I think the higher for longer on prices is probably a good basis for making investment decisions. So if you get a bit scared by how steep that chart is, I think we're going to have a long period of time up here at these elevated prices, just because we have this massive supply gap. So we have a suite of projects. As I said, we got 5 different projects, 2 kind of cornerstone trophy things, one in the US, ISR, one big one in Australia. They both have excellent provenance from long-standing people in the uranium business. The American one was drilled out by a division of General Electric, who was trying to sell nuclear power plants. This was done in the very late 70s. And the one in Australia, the previous owner was a company called Rio Tinto that I'm sure you've heard about. We are now moving all of our projects forward in terms of getting them on the track to production. I think a lot of the pace at which the companies that are in this developer space are moving has really been based on how fast the market got to a place where people felt confident that we were going to be here for long enough that we could all make money at this, and there weren't a lot of false starts. For those of us that lived through Fukushima, post-Fukushima, there were an awful lot of false dawns. And so I think you saw a little hesitancy from some of the companies coming out of the gate in terms of getting their projects going just because of what had happened before. You know, we'd have a price spike and then it would go back. But I think we're really in a good place now. And I would say all of the developer universe, all of these projects are going to get built in this cycle, including ours. And they're all just going to happen on different timelines. We've got a lot of catalysts this year, including a big catalyst in Australia, where our biggest impediment there is not being able to build a project because of a government policy that's kind of a legacy crazy policy around anti-nuclear stuff going back to the original dawn of the nuclear age almost. We think it's almost over just with what's happening in the world. And in addition, there's a state election in October. And it's kind of a binary outcome for us. If the Liberal Party gets back in, and they were in 2012 to 2015, we'll basically be able to green light go and run hard and build our project. That was the case in 2012 and 2015. They just weren't in power long enough. So we've got a very big catalyst there. So, you know, I'm not going to go and dwell on this stuff. I would just say, just the only thing I'd point to on that slide is the little blue shaded stuff at the top, which is what they call the restarts. This is mostly WNA data. They're the authoritative source that the utilities really rely on to sort of make some of their price decisions. And you can see they're assuming that all these previous projects and things that were partly built and everything are going to happen. And even then, there's a ridiculous deficit. So that gives us confidence about why we're going to be higher for longer. In terms of the way that, you know, you can learn a lot from reading the headlines. There's been a lot of interesting headlines really about nuclear. Nuclear is really having a moment, as you probably all know, for a variety of reasons, including net zero, including we're really looking hard at, you know, what the energy file looks like in all of these countries. You're looking at 30, 50 years, and it's a pretty tough picture. If you don't use coal as base load. So you can see just from some of that this issue of nuclear is very, very topical. Some of these headlines are less than a week old. They're now having a national debate in Australia about whether they want to have nuclear power, and that will be a big prominent issue at their next federal election. So I think we see a nice trend happening. The template for this is probably Sweden, where the Green Party there basically was, you know, no, anti-nuclear forever, even though they have 6 nuclear power plants. And they're going to have, I think, a vote in their parliament or something very soon about getting rid of that impediment. So you can see it, and that's Greta Thunberg country, obviously. So yeah, we're optimistic. In terms of the project, so in terms of the cap structure, there's 250 million shares out. The stock's been around a long time. It's never been rolled back. The insiders own a little over 10%. We're in all the ETFs. ETFs are a big factor, as you know, in these in these names. It's a good place to start your homework, actually looking at some of these ETFs and what they hold in terms of companies that have projects, companies that have typically market cap volume, et cetera. And we have quite a lot of prominent uranium shareholders as well. We have research coverage from my friend David, and I think with the release of our preliminary economic study that I'm going to talk about here in a second in the States, we're going to start to get a lot more people looking at this because they can more easily build models around how to value the company. And so I think one of our objectives this year is to sort of broaden out the research coverage. So our American properties are all in what's called the four corners of the United States. You can see on that map where those four states all come together. You know, this New Mexico was historically a huge producer of uranium, particularly in the 50s and the 70s. It kind of all came to a halt in the early 80s. There's a bunch of legacy projects that remain there. Really, all three of ours are from that earlier era and the later era. The two hard rock ones are ex-Homestake projects. With the current run up in the price, they suddenly became very interesting in the last 6 months because at $100, we knew the smaller one of the two, we were going to be able to take that to the only hard rock mill left in the United States, which is EFR's mill at Blanding. But suddenly the other project, which is bigger, it's 10 million pounds, suddenly looks like it can be trucked 200 miles to that site as well. So that's something to look forward to in terms of catalyst. The LaSalle, which is, it's on the map here. I can't really reach over there. It's too far to reach, but it's 50 miles from the mill. The other one's 200 miles from the mill. And then we have our ISR project that is in two separate locations in northwest New Mexico. This is what our ISR project called Church Rock Crown Point looks like on the ground. We did some drilling there, basically validation. We had to do that in order to then do the economic study that we did. And as I said, all this took a little bit of time. We were probably one of the companies that was a little hesitant in terms of running full speed, just until we had price certainty that this was all going to work. So we are now running very quickly. We have an NRC, what's called an NRC license, which is your federal permitting in the United States, which is required in the state of New Mexico. We require one state permit still to get permitted. At that point, we'll be shovel ready. And then we'll be building an ISR project, which you'll see the economics of next. But if you understand ISR, in situ recovery, these things are all tend to be low capital to start with, relatively low production profiles, typically 1 million to 2 million pounds. We happen to have a good one that maybe has a capacity to be a bit bigger than that. It's certainly got a big resource. But they lend themselves to being built relatively quickly once you're shovel ready. So the part of people want us to give timelines now about what production is. We control the part of the timeline from when we're shovel ready, and then it'll be relatively quickly into production. And what we don't control is this little window in between where we got to get this final permit. We are stuck in on that permit now, with the state of New Mexico. So this is what this is some of the detail from the study that we released. There's 50 million pounds. As you can see, there's these typical paleo channels that you have in different sections of the land. These things are all going to be mined sequentially. So typically you start with one of them, get that up and running, get the plant running, and then you incrementally build that up. The nature of the study that we produced showed a 31-year mine life at 1 million pounds a year. Now in practice, we're going to be mining it more quickly than that, but the nature of our licensing that underpins the whole project, which, as I said, which is from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in Washington. We have a criteria in our license that says you can produce 1 million pounds, you then demonstrate restoration, and then you can apply to up the production level. The plant site that we have that is permitted at this separate location called Crown Point, it has 3 million pound capacity. So ultimately, between our project and any other potential feeder projects, we would have the ability to produce 3 million pounds through there. And we're the only people in the state of New Mexico that have that. You can see from the grades too, there's a lot of consistency across this deposit. And these grades are typical of ISRs. If you've listened to a lot of uranium presentations over the last few days, I'm sure you're thoroughly confused because some of the grades you can't get anywhere near that have, percentages in the teens and stuff. And then you have things like this that seem low grade, but this is the grade of all of Kazakhstan. So if you want to put this project in context grade wise with what produces most of the uranium in the world, that's what ISR stuff looks like in terms of grades. That's what an ISR looks like on the ground. You can see why this is sort of user friendly for locals and stuff like that. When you're finished there, you pull all the caps, you won't see any of that, and you'll just have your nice green field back. These projects typically, this is a very typical one, you know, at £1 million a year, it's going to have cash costs in the mid to high 20s, all in costs in the 30s. The costs will get better with scale. And so we like this project a lot. It really underpins the company nicely. It's $50 million to build it, which obviously is well within the capability of a junior. So you're not facing some of these nightmare scenarios that any of you that own some, a lot of resource stocks that are doing gigantic builds, $1 billion CapEx builds, and you get scary headlines where there's an update, and it's never an update that the project's coming in faster or the CapEx was not what we thought. So the beautiful thing about one of these is $50 million to start. Just some sensitivity numbers. I won't dwell on that. I want to flip over to Australia pretty quickly. That's what the infrastructure on the ground looks like at where the mill will be built. There's another 15 million pounds there, which we own 5. Encore owns the balance of it and 2 sections of land. This will get produced probably later in the mine life. It's a little bit deeper and a little bit better grade, but there's a nice ISR thing there as well. I'm not going to dwell on these 2 hard rock projects. Suffice to say that we are permitting these. This one's being permitted with the Forest Service. That will probably be 18 months at that, and then that will be effectively shovel ready. But then we have to build the mine equivalent, which will basically just be driving some adits into that mountain there, and then trucking the thing 200 miles to Blanding is the business plan. And this was the business plan, by the way, when Homestake permitted this. They permitted it twice in the 80s, so it should be able to be permitted. This is a little asset called LaSalle. This is the one 50 miles from EFR's mill. It's the highest grade nearest thing to that mill. Very small. We don't even have a 43101 resource on it, but it's around 3 million pounds. So it's a nice little starter thing. It's probably sub 10 million CapEx to get ore and trucks and onto the mill. And obviously at $100, there's serious margin in this now. So it's interesting. Obviously this all requires EFR to first use their mill, come up with a business plan for the mill. Historically, a lot of the hard rock stuff in the United States, all these mills took in ore from other companies. This was really how the business ran. And it's probably going to be the same way again. Flipping over to Australia, which is really where we have the kind of marquee big trophy asset there. This is what the land package looks like on the ground. We're straddling the 2 states, Northern Territory and Queensland. We have a very large land package there. It's up near the Gulf of Carpentaria, so very far in the north, very tropical. Distinct wet season, dry season when you're working on the ground. This is a picture of the land package, which I won't dwell on that. Suffice to say that there's a bunch of different things going on in there in terms of land that we've now applied for what's called a mineral development license, allows us to have full tenure. This Murphy project over on the left side there is a big greenfield thing that we also got from Rio Tinto. And it's really effectively the extension of the belt. So we basically own an entire district. There's 3 deposits in there that make up the 50 million pounds, and then a whole series of other targets that we're now getting more serious about looking at the exploration potential. When we bought this thing in the last cycle, we basically had to take all Rio's work. We did a lot of studies. We did a lot of our own drilling. We validated everything. We did 2 economic studies, and we were good to go in 2012. But for the price of uranium, which is $25. So this has been sitting there ready to build for more than a decade. What we're doing now with the work that we're doing, though, is we decided we need to get back at that. We need to get this project visibility up. And we had a lot of low-hanging fruit in terms of exploration targets that most companies would die for, to be honest, in terms of the potential. We didn't talk about the scale of that land package, but I think it's the size of Rhode Island. And so you've got a lot of ability. Some of these targets are a long way apart. Like some of these satellite things we're drilling are 6-8 miles from where the core of the action is. And so this is one of them called the Amphitheater that we went up and drilled some holes. It's very early on, but we're getting nice results. And we've probably got 3 or 4 of these satellite things, plus some infill, plus some other expansion capability. Our goal this year really is to take the 50 million pounds, which lent itself to doing a study like this, the last time we did an economic study. And this is a conventional mine, open pit, low strip ratio, high metallurgies, everything's out in the open. I think the CapEx was 300 million roughly back the last time we did it. But this is very similar to what you'd have with a kind of an easy open pit gold mine with good economics, low strip, et cetera. But obviously we can enhance it. The big enhancement you want to do with these kind of projects is mine life, because the utilities are really, really interested in projects like this that are in tier 1 jurisdictions and that have scale. Because with a thing of 4 million pounds, you can put 3, 4, 5 utilities in here, and they all get a little piece of your production, which is really what they want. They really want to diversify, right? They want to diversify their book, and so this is a very attractive project for the utilities. Our goal this year, though, as I said, is really to now, because to make it longer mine life, obviously, the more mine life you have, the more resource you have, the more longevity you have, the more valuable of a customer you potentially are. So our goal now is to, this year really is to try and take that 50 million pounds and scale it up to 65, 70, which we think we can do relatively easily with some of these targets. That just gives you a sense, that section about how shallow everything is. We're talking about things that are really shallow. Some of these grades appear low, but basically, I think the Paladin restart grade is some 500 ppm. So if you want to put that in context, it gives you some context. The Namibia grade overall is probably 200 something, between 200 and 300. So as a satellite thing, which is going to be incremental, these grades are really quite nice. This gives you a sense of one of our targets. There's a big radiometric anomaly there. You can see we went in there and had a bunch of success. A lot of this stuff hasn't even been tested. So in terms of adding easy pounds, this is going to be kind of one of the places we're going to go this year. Now we have one of our deposits, one of the 3 deposits, which is called Warabagoo. It has the lowest amount of the resource in the 50 million pounds. It's probably the least well drilled out. It also has potential on, there's a big dike structure there you can see in the middle, the green thing in the middle. We found that, I don't know, it was 10 years or so more ago, that when you went on the other side of the dike, it actually looked like it opened up, and we've now validated that. So there's a big target there that has a potential to add meaningfully if this sort of thesis holds. And we've got a lot of open ground between us. I think there's a whole 800 meters to the north with similar kind of looking numbers on it. So we're pretty excited. There's going to be a big program this year. We drove 4,000 meters last year. We'll probably do at least double that this year. Multiple rigs, probably starting late April, early May. There'll be lots of news flow on this. We'll be getting lots of results. I mean, I don't know how many of the 40 holes we drilled last year that hit, but a pretty big number of them. Yeah, this will be a pretty exciting year. So lots of news flow to look forward to, and obviously lots of other catalysts to look forward to, including the election. Again, it's more on the ground. There's the sort of catalyst list. I see I got 2 minutes left for questions, so I will stop there.